Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Will, good to see you. Thank you, Will. How about another round of applause for the Public Library and Will O'Hearn. Unbelievable partners of the Chattanooga Design Studio and this program that we call CIVIQ. CIVIQ honors Robert Taylor, who was one of the trustees of the Lyndhurst Foundation for over a decade. And I want to remind you that CIVIQ is a hallmark educational series of the Chattanooga Design Studio. We are really grateful to be able to present this program to you as pure education, free and open to the public. Please tell your friends, bring them. It's a wonderful opportunity for us. We're grateful to the Lyndhurst Foundation for years of support. We're coming up on 8 years. Yes, yes. It's just amazing to think we're coming up on 8 years of offering this program free and open to the public. That's really unheard of in cities across this country, and so it's a unique program. Again, on behalf of Jack Wood and I at the Chattanooga Design Studio, we're grateful to bring this program to you. Over the course of the 8 years, hopefully you've had a chance, if you've been to CIVIQ. Let's see a show of hands. If you've been to a CIVIQ before, oh, wonderful. We got some veterans here. This is wonderful. If you've been to a CIVIQ before, there's a good chance that you've heard a topic about mobility and transit and quality of life and how they link. And that's intentional. We crafted this program called CIVIQ around the 4 basic themes that were included in the 2005 downtown plan. And they were built systems, natural systems, transit systems, and the public realm. And so understanding our city in those basic systems and how they relate to one another and to us and to the human experience is really what this program is about. And so it's no surprise then that we have continued this dialogue, whether it be through Victor Dover and the art of street design. I remember Veronica Davis very clearly at the Camp House here downtown, who talked with us about people-centric planning for transit and for mobility. We've continued this thread, and we've brought you so many voices from across this nation and their stories and their challenges from their communities. That's really what this is about. It's about sharing stories with one another and sharing the opportunities that exist through stories, through understanding of those challenges in other communities. We're bringing it a little bit closer to home from the national conversation with Erin Hafkenschiel. She is the president of ThinkTennessee. Forgive me, I'm not a notes person. If you know me very well, I don't really speak from scripted notes, but Erin's background is extensive, isn't it? Has anybody seen her bio? My goodness. Her educational background is unbelievable. So I don't want to get anything incorrect, and so I'm going to read just a little bit. Her career is quite storied across public policy, across higher education, municipal government. It's amazing, her background in municipal government in Nashville, philanthropy, to say the least. She has been the executive director of mobility and transportation at the Vanderbilt University. She has served in 2 mayor's office terms as the Director of Office of Transportation and Sustainability. Her background and her education is extensive. She has been a U.S. Fulbright scholar to China, and her background in the political arts and economic background from UC Berkeley with a Bachelor of Arts in Industrialized Societies. She holds a master's in public policy and urban planning from Harvard School and the Kennedy School at Harvard. And she's currently, if that's not enough, she is currently pursuing her PhD in civil infrastructure systems to Vanderbilt University. And so I hope that you hear that we have brought someone with a great extensive background and knowledge around transit mobility and how that might influence our community here from lessons learned from Nashville. And so without further ado, please help me welcome Erin Hafkenschiel.
I don't think I need it. Yeah. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay, great. Good evening to you all. It is such an honor to be here. I have heard of some of the national speakers that have come to speak with you as part of this event series, and I'm truly honored to be in that mix. As Eric said, my name is Erin Hafkenschiel, and I'm the president of Think Tennessee. Thank you so much to Eric and Jack and the Chattanooga Design Studio for having me this evening. I think I need to move some of that. Here we go. I always like to provide a roadmap at the beginning of a talk so that we know that where we're headed. Transportation pun intended. This evening, I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about Think Tennessee and our work. Then we'll jump into a brief history of Nashville's transportation history and how various efforts over the last 100 years influenced Nashville's built environment and transportation system in both good and bad ways, and ultimately led to the transit referendum success, Choose How You Move, in November of 2024. I'll share a little bit about the 2017 Improve Act, which is the state enabling legislation that allowed Nashville to pursue a transit referendum. We'll talk about what was actually included in the Choose How You Move plan, what was actually on the ballot, and then I'll share some lessons learned from the 2018 transit referendum. As you heard in the bio, I was in the mayor's office in Nashville during that 2018 referendum and learned quite a few lessons during that process that I feel like influenced the success in the 2024 effort. And as we close for the evening, we'll finish up with some data and information about transit and transportation right here in Chattanooga. So for those of you who don't know about Think Tennessee is a nonpartisan, results-oriented think tank that uses research, engagement, and advocacy to build a state where all Tennesseans are civically engaged and economically secure. So what does that really mean? We use data and research to drive evidence-based policies that strengthen the voice of voters, better support working families, and move Tennessee forward. We were launched in 2017, and at the time we just had one full-time staff member, and right now we're in the process of hiring our 11th staff person, so we're really excited by that growth. Thank you for that, whoop. This growth has enabled us to expand our issue area focus and also to be able to conduct more research that serves the needs of our communities across the state. If you hadn't have a chance to check out some of our work, we have two incredible dashboards. Our State of Our State dashboard, which ranks Tennessee against peer states on 143 indicators. It's 56,000 data points, so I'm sure you'll find something that's interesting to you. As well as our State of Our Counties dashboard, which ranks all 95 counties across 104 indicators. We've recently released a two-part series on voting here in Tennessee, a report on energy affordability and reliability, and as well as 4 policy briefs ahead of this year's legislative session on absentee voting, childcare, housing, and workforce development. We have a few reports in the works as well, including a criminal justice landscape analysis and a State of Working Tennessee report. So we're really all over the place in a good and exciting way. So let's jump into some of Nashville's transportation history. At Think Tennessee, we focus on transportation because it is a key issue of affordability for working families. Transportation costs represent nearly 25% of a typical Tennessee household. And that cost is driven in part by the fact that Tennesseans don't always have the options to choose how they get around. I've heard plenty of people say, they say this in Nashville, I'm sure they say this here in Chattanooga, they say it all over the state of Tennessee, that Tennesseans love their cars, and that we don't have a culture for walking, biking, and riding transit. But it's important to know that Nashvillians and Tennesseans drive a lot because of the decisions that were made in the past about the infrastructure that we have today. This is Church Street in downtown Nashville in the 1920s. You probably noticed that there are cars sharing the street with streetcars and pedestrians. And the point of showing this to you is that in the past, we shared the street with a variety of road users. Nashville also grew as a multimodal city. This is Nashville's streetcar network at the turn of the century. The dark lines on the map represent the streetcar routes, which was one of the best in the Southeast. The streetcars became electric in 1889 and spanned 50 miles at their peak, operating until the 1920s. The last streetcar was pulled up in 1941. Many of the streetcars were on our busiest corridors even today. Nolensville, Belmont Boulevard, West End, Church Street, Charlotte Avenue, Jefferson Street, Dickerson, and Gallatin. Keep some of those in mind, you're going to hear them again. But through policy and funding decisions, we started to make it hard to walk, bike, or ride transit. Many people don't know that car companies invented the term jaywalking, crossing the street unlawfully or without regard for approaching traffic, and helped pass legislation across the country to make it a crime. It comes from the term J driver, which is a derogatory term for someone that doesn't obey the rules. Then, just to make sure, they launched a propaganda campaign to shame pedestrians into complying with these laws. They literally cleared the way for cars to take over our streets. And these are some of the propaganda campaign that was funded by the auto industry. And then even here in Nashville, we made decisions that impacted the infrastructure that we have today. This is one of the many streets, this is right around the corner from my house in Nashville, that doesn't have sidewalks. Nashville used to require home builders to build sidewalks. But in the 1940s, these requirements became less and less stringent and eventually were no longer enforced. It wasn't until the mid-1990s that we started building sidewalks again. We just took a half-century break from building sidewalks. And this left us with only 19% of the sidewalks that we need in our city. And these decisions disproportionately impacted Black Nashvillians. Many of these, first with the redlining of our inner core neighborhoods, and then with the destruction of Jefferson Street and North Nashville neighborhoods to make way for Interstate 40. And so today, after decades of designing streets only for cars, we've been left with a city where we have to drive everywhere, even to the grocery store across the street. How many of you can think of an intersection in Chattanooga where you'd prefer to drive across the street than walk across the street? Can you think of one? Yeah, you guys have them too then. So as a result, Nashvillians have very little choice but to drive, and they do. 68% of Nashville residents drove alone to work in 2023. But more people are coming. Nashville has grown rapidly over the last 10 to 15 years. And if everyone drives, that growth means more cars on the road, more congestion, and longer commutes. Since the last transit referendum in 2018, the Nashville region grew by 204,000 people, which is equal to about 112 people per day. If this growth rate continues, which is expected to do, by 2050, Nashville will have over 3 million people and be larger than the Denver region is today. But traffic and congestion are not the only reasons we need more options to get around. I mentioned at the beginning that one of Think Tennessee's focuses is on lowering cost of living for working families. Housing costs usually get most of the attention, particularly in Nashville. I know they are getting a lot of attention here in Chattanooga. But transportation costs for Nashville families are very high. The typical Nashville household spends 22% of their income on transportation. Moderate income households spend 25%, when 15% is considered affordable. Annual average driving costs in Nashville are $14,551. This is up nearly $5,000 since the pandemic. So now let's talk a little bit about transit. Transit ridership in Nashville is low because service and funding levels are low. This is data from 2012. And you may be asking, why is the data lady sharing data from 2012? The reason is because when we now call it WeGo, our transit agency, was then called MTA, when they did this analysis comparing peer cities to Nashville, we were at the bottom. Since this study was completed, all 6 of these other cities have passed transit referendums and increased the amount of funding that they have for transit. So we were falling even further behind. Nashville was the only one left of these 7 cities without dedicated funding. And in 2018, we assumed that it was one of the last cities in the country. But I could never find an accurate count of who had dedicated funding and who did not. So as we started to sense that the next transit referendum was around the corner, I wanted to track down that statistic once and for all. So I turned to my amazing team at Think Tennessee and I told them, can you find every single transit agency budget for the top 50 metro areas in the country? They definitely gave me a funny look the first time I asked for it. But I said, it's okay, we'll find it, we'll figure out how to track it. And we did. We found that at the time, 46 of the 50 largest metro areas nationwide had secured some form of dedicated funding. 2 of the 4 that did not were right here in Tennessee, Nashville and Memphis. The other 2 were Orlando and Hartford, Connecticut. 39 of the 46 major metro areas with dedicated funding utilize some form of sales tax, which generates on average almost $394 million in annual revenue per city and is the most common form of revenue used for dedicated funding. I'm proud to say that this statistic, the fact that Nashville was one of only 4 cities, major cities across the country without dedicated funding, ended up being one of the most cited of the referendum. It appeared in nearly every news article covering the referendum. This is an example of how data drives better policymaking. The success of Nashville's transit referendum was not the result of work only between 2018 and 2024. It was in part the result of years of transit advocacy and ongoing work to try and improve Nashville's transit system. We've already talked, it's running a little bit off the slide, but you can still get the main point. We've talked a little bit about streetcars, the elimination of streetcars and the construction of Interstate 40. I also want to mention Nashville's commuter rail line, the WeGo Star, which began operation in 2006, and then followed by nearly a decade of planning, including Nashville Next and Motion and Walk and Bike. There were also a few epic failures in the mix, as covered by the news clippings here on the right. The AMP in 2012 was a transit initiative spearheaded by Mayor Carl Dean that focused on a 7.1-mile corridor of dedicated bus lanes connecting East and West Nashville through downtown. And then there was Let's Move Nashville in 2018, which I worked very closely on, which included 5 light rail lines on 28 miles of track, 4 rapid bus routes, a 50% increase in the bus fleet, 41% increase in service hours, and 19 neighborhood transit centers. It also included investments in sidewalks, safer crossings and intersections, and bike lanes to make it safer and more comfortable to get around. As most of you know, it lost at the polls on May 1st, 2018, 64% to 34%. The COVID pandemic in 2019 followed that big loss, and the city moved towards both the Better Bus Plan and Mayor Cooper's transportation plan, which emphasized improved bus service and a focus on basic neighborhood infrastructure, but didn't have any dedicated funding. As we've seen in many peer cities across the country, it often takes a city a few times to get it right, and that was certainly the case in Nashville. So I want to take a quick pause to talk a little bit about the Improve Act because it's so important to this conversation. It's a little wonky, so bear with me. Both of Nashville's referendums were enabled by the General Assembly's adoption of the 2017 Improve Act, which was mostly known for the increase in gas tax to fund road and highway projects implemented by TDOT. The enabling legislation, however, authorized cities and counties of a certain size to raise dedicated funds for transit through a voter referendum. The Improve Act lays out specific steps localities must complete before getting on the ballot, and a major component is the development of the TIP, the Transit Improvement Program. The timeline showed here is a sample of a condensed, rapid 10-month time frame that Think Tennessee created in anticipation of the 2024 referendum. And our prediction was pretty close to what happened. Of course, cities and counties don't need to complete the steps in 10 months. This is the fastest you could probably do it, to be honest. They, of course, can plan ahead and build more time in as needed, particularly if it's a city or county's first referendum. One important thing to note is that while the Improve Act limits the dedicated funding revenues for transit projects, eligible projects can include supporting infrastructure, including sidewalks, traffic signals, bike lanes, greenways, road improvements. And this has actually been recently tested, just in case we were wondering, by a court case in Nashville. The city of Nashville was sued, saying that the signal improvements and the sidewalk improvements were not eligible under state law. And the court case, after a number of appeals back and forth, has ruled that that infrastructure is eligible. So let's briefly explore the steps involved. The first step, as I mentioned, is drafting the tip. This is by far the most time-consuming process, and it shapes the essence of what's included in the transit referendum. It outlines the projects, service changes, and improvements that the city or county wants to make. State law includes specific requirements that the tip must include, including the revenue sources included, what those revenue sources are projected to raise over that 25-year time period, cost estimates for the projects, as well as their specific locations. The second step is a financing plan that has to be reviewed by a third party, and then the state comptroller has to review and sign off on that third party review. The third step is that the local council votes on whether to put the tip on the ballot and also approves the ballot referendum language. And then the final step is election day. If adopted, it's voted on by the public at the next general election. There are 6 different types of revenue that can be collected under the Improve Act. These include sales tax, hotel-motel tax, business privilege taxes, residential development fees, rental car taxes, and wheel taxes. I do want to point out, you can see the surcharges included here on the slide for each of the revenue sources. But a surcharge means that taxes adopted by local referendum under the Improve Act can exceed the rate caps otherwise established by state law. So right now the sales tax cap is 9.75%. But under the Improve Act, you could raise it an additional 2.75% above wherever your city or county is today. That's technically feasible. Whole other conversation about whether that's politically feasible. If you'd like to learn more about the Improve Act and some of its components, we wrote a blog post in early 2024 that laid out some of the key considerations for Nashville as it debated whether to pursue a transit referendum. And you can scan this here and check it out if you want to learn more. So now let's talk about what was included in the Choose How You Move plan that was approved by voters in November 2024. CHIME includes 4 major components, the 4 S's: sidewalks, signals, service, and safety. The central theme of these elements is that there is an investment that benefits every mode of transportation, whether you drive, walk, bike, or ride transit. And there's something in the plan designed to improve how you move and how you access destinations. This is the map of all the improvements included in the tip. We called this the Everything Bagel Map. Nashville has 35 different council districts and 5 at-large council members, so 40 total. And they wanted to make sure that there was an improvement in all 35 council districts. It was intended to show that Nashvillians can expect Choose How You Move investments in every neighborhood where they live. So let's start with sidewalks. CHIME included funding for 86 miles of new sidewalks. By comparison, in 2023, Nashville had only completed 6.5 miles of sidewalks. So we need 1,900 miles, but 86 is a good start. This investment will help Nashville complete the entire priority sidewalk network that's outlined in the Walk and Bike Master Plan when combined with annual capital spending. Signals, this one's very exciting. Choose How You Move has funding to update 2 out of every 3 traffic signals across Davidson County, nearly 600 of them, getting them connected to fiber and connected to the new traffic management center. When I started working in the mayor's office in 2016, we were one of the last cities in the country without a traffic management center. And all of our traffic signals had to be manually updated. So somebody had to drive to the traffic signal, open that little box at the bottom, update the timing. It still is a mess, but we're far behind and we're finally starting to catch up. Being able to make these changes will make commutes less frustrating and also means that emergency vehicles will be able to respond more quickly and buses will be able to move more efficiently. The system will use technology to learn traffic patterns and manage demand in real time. And NDOT traffic staff, like I said, can control signals remotely. So exciting. So that police officers don't have to stand at intersections during special events to change the lights and manage traffic, which, by the way, police officers have no idea how to manage traffic. So that's a terrible idea. Who has ever been at an event in downtown Nashville and seen a police officer? I saw a hand in the back. It's a very common thing in downtown Nashville, and it's about to be phased out. So this is service. This is the transit improvements, but transit doesn't begin with S, so they had to call it service. This is about 75% of the funding included in the plan is covered under service. High-frequency daily service with WeGo will double to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year on Nashville's busiest corridors, like Gallatin, Nolensville, and Murfreesboro Pike. Do those corridors sound familiar? They're all corridors where we had a streetcar. There will be 54 miles of all-access corridors where buses are arriving reliably at least every 15 minutes, and transit-only lanes will be put in wherever possible. This will occur on 7 different corridors, as well as the East Bank and downtown. They will also build 12 transit centers at key locations throughout the city. This is actually hugely important because it allows routes to connect neighborhoods rather than having to travel all the way into downtown and all the way back out, which is the traditional sort of hub and spoke model that has controlled transit in Nashville for decades and makes it much more convenient and efficient to provide crosstown service. As well as 17 park and ride facilities so that more residents can access transit even if they don't live in walking distance of a bus stop. And last but not least, safety, the final S of the 4 S's. Nashville is one of the most dangerous cities for those walking and biking. In 2023, 40 people died while walking or biking. The improvements in Chime include 285 bus stops to have improved lighting and weather cover. Many of our bus stops in Nashville are just a signpost along the side of the road. Some of them are in a ditch along the side of the road. So this is a significant improvement for transit riders across the county. 35 high injury intersections will be redesigned to reduce safety risks. And this is hugely important because 59% of our fatal and serious injuries occur on just 6% of our roads. So targeting just a few super dangerous intersections will have an outsized impact on safety across the county. And then finally, 35 miles of bikeways and complete streets will be added to improve mobility options, creating safer routes for both recreational and commuter cyclists. So how will this all be funded? It's so fun talking to a group of people about a transit tax that won't impact you. I highly recommend it. It's way more fun. All of these improvements are paid for by a half-cent increase in sales tax, which will raise Davidson County's tax rate from 9.25% to 9.75%. This ends up being a little bit less than $6 per month for most households in Davidson County. And you'll remember when I was talking about the Improve Act, there were 6 options that the mayor could have chosen, and he decided to go with just the sales tax, which is by far the revenue source that generates the most amount of revenue. This increase actually brings Davidson County in line with most of the surrounding counties who are already at 9.75%. And the city did some estimates as part of the TIP development that showed that nearly 60% of Davidson County sales tax is actually paid for by non-residents, so by tourists and by commuters that are coming into the county. So how long will it take for all of these improvements to be put in place? Unfortunately, it's not an overnight solution. Within the first year, Choose How You Move is already in the process of rolling out a queue jump on Murfreesboro Pike, a bus lane pilot program on Gallatin. They've started a planning process for a new transit center, which will help decentralize the transit network, like we talked about, and numerous street improvements, signal upgrades, and security improvements for transit. And one of my personal favorites, one that I fought for to be included in the 2018 referendum, is a low-income fare program to make it free for low-income residents to ride transit. Of course, service improvements in particular can happen relatively quickly, particularly increased frequency and extended operating hours, but the longer-term capital projects like the BRT projects and all-access corridors will take up to 15 years. Okay, so now that we've discussed the basics of Nashville's recent referendum, I wanted to share a few lessons learned along the way that may or may not be useful for Chattanooga in the future. The first one is about voter turnout. This is a fun twist of fate that my organization now works on both working family issues and transportation as well as voting, because it played such a huge role. An analysis by the Calvert Street Group shows that when turnout is over 40%, transit referendums pass 75% of the time. But Tennessee had the worst voter turnout in the country in 2022. We ranked 51st in the country. How many of you knew that? Wow, only 2. We have the worst voter turnout in the country. So everybody vote, tell your friends to vote. We need more people to vote. So picking the right election is crucial to transit success at the ballot box. Okay, can anybody guess when we have the highest turnout? During presidential elections. So in May of 2018, when Nashville voters rejected the Let's Move Nashville transit referendum, 64-36, that vote took place during Davidson County's primaries, which had lower turnout compared to the November 2024 presidential elections. In 2018, 124,000 people voted, or about 31% turnout. In 2024, 279,000 people voted, or about 55% turnout. Still pretty, excuse me, I almost swore. Still pretty terrible, but over that 40% mark that we needed for it to be better for transit. One thing I want to point out is probably really, really hard to read these numbers down here at the bottom, but more people voted against the chime referendum in 2024, 96,000 people voted against it, than voted against Let's Move Nashville in 2018, 79,000. But so many more people voted that it didn't matter. This isn't unique to Nashville. In November 2024, voters nationwide supported 19 out of 26 transit referendums across the country, which is 73%. So voter turnout matters. And of course, you need trusted leadership. Anytime you're asking residents to raise their taxes, you have to have trusted leadership. The Nashville Chamber did an analysis before the 2018 referendum, and they looked at successful referendums across the country and found that political will and strong champions are critical for success. It doesn't always have to be the mayor, but in strong mayor systems like Nashville, and particularly when Nashville is the biggest city amongst the region, it usually is the mayor. This has certainly been the case in Nashville with all 3 of our efforts, the AMP, Let's Move, and Chime. In both 2018 and 2024, the community trust in the mayor became a key element in convincing or not convincing Nashville voters to support the transit referendum. Both Mayor Megan Barry and Mayor Freddie O'Connell were crucial in the planning and development of the TIP, that really important document, in presenting the case for the referendums to the public. Unfortunately, Mayor Barry's announcement of her affair with her bodyguard in January of 2018 and subsequent resignation 6 weeks later was extremely damaging to public trust of city government during the 2018 referendum and ultimately was not something that we could come back from. On the flip side, Mayor O'Connell's success in championing the transit initiative was driven by some key factors that helped build public trust. He rode transit before becoming mayor and still does, giving him experience with the issues facing the system and credibility among voters. He also served in transit leadership positions before becoming mayor, including a term as a board member and chair of the transit agency. The third lesson is transit advocacy ecosystems. Transit advocacy can be led by the mayor, but it doesn't happen alone. Building an ecosystem of diverse support for transit and alternative modes of transportation is crucial to convincing the community that transit investments matter. And it has to be from everywhere. Businesses represented by local chambers, walking and biking advocates, city council members, housing realtors and developers, grassroots organizers looking for economic equity. A successful transit referendum is built on proposals that reflect the goals and needs of our communities. One additional point here that I want to make is the role that the Nashville Chamber played. They staff an initiative called Moving Forward. I've had the honor to serve on the Moving Forward Coordinating Committee since I left Metro Government in 2018, so I may be a little bit biased, but I think Moving Forward played a critical role in educating the public and keeping business and communities leaders engaged. The Chamber also raised funding for both the 2018 and 2024 paid campaigns, nearly $3 million in both cases. Lesson number 4 is transparency in the TIP process. One of the very valid criticisms of the 2018 referendum is that the development of the TIP took place behind closed doors. I don't think it was done maliciously. There was real engineering, cost estimation, and revenue projections that needed to be completed during a very condensed time period. But in hindsight, it's very clear to see that people were surprised when the TIP was released in October 2017, particularly by the tunnel downtown and the light rail lines. Mayor O'Connell and his team, led by Michael Briggs, did an excellent job in two big changes from 2018. The first was clearly communicating to the public that the projects included in the CHIME TIP were all pulled from existing plans and studies, over 70 of them to be exact. And the mayor created 2 advisory committees, a technical advisory committee, which I had the honor of serving on, and a community advisory committee, and live streamed those meetings so that the public could watch them. As a result, when the TIP was released, no one felt like the plan had come out of nowhere, but that it was the result of decades of planning and over 70 planning processes. And the final lesson, lesson number 5, is clear and simple messaging. In addition to the improved transparency in the TIP development process, both the mayor's office and the paid campaign had very clear and simple messaging. The message wasn't always changing. There was much less a focus on transit reducing congestion, which was a big talking point of the paid campaign in 2018, and more on a comprehensive back-to-basics approach that leans into improvements for all modes of transportation. Something in it for everyone, regardless of mode. So now we've reflected on Nashville's success. Are you all still with me? Okay, great. And all the steps that it took to get there. But I know that Chattanooga faces its own challenges and opportunities. So what can we learn about Chattanooga's past and how lessons from Nashville might apply? Chattanooga's transportation system is similar to Nashville's in many ways. You all had an excellent streetcar system that played a key role in industrialization and growth. Every neighborhood between Signal Mountain, Lookout Mountain, and Missionary Ridge had an electric streetcar adjacent or running through it, operating on key corridors like Market Street and Macaulay Avenue. Passengers could even ride a streetcar into Georgia all the way to Chickamauga, am I pronouncing that right? Chickamauga Battlefield. The photo on the right shows a mule-drawn car, an electric streetcar, in a parade on 13th and Market Streets in Chattanooga in 1909. I just want to point out the 2 bikes. There were no bikes in the Church Street photo in downtown Nashville. So this is clearly foreshadowing Chattanooga's outdoor recreation future. But similar to Nashville, through policy and funding choices, Chattanooga made it difficult to walk, bike, or take transit as we moved through the 20th century. Streetcar companies gave way to buses because buses were easier to operate in terms of technology, and buses were underfunded as segregation and redlining became more aggressive. Redlining created neighborhoods with fewer sidewalks and fewer street trees. At the end of the day, these policies made very intentional decisions about underinvesting in certain neighborhoods and certain modes of transportation. And so as a result, Chattanooga's mode share looks very similar to Nashville's. It's even slightly worse. 76% of Chattanoogans drive alone to work. Less than 8% carpool, and less than 1% take transit. It's no wonder that Chattanoogans lost 26 hours in 2024 stuck in traffic, up 4% since the year before in 2023. That puts Chattanooga in the top 50 in the country in congestion, despite barely being in the top 100 populated metropolitan areas. And like Nashville, Hamilton County is growing. It is projected to grow from 386,000 in 2024 to more than 500,000 residents in the next 40 years. And its transportation challenges will continue and only worsen without smart investments and policies that create more access to opportunity. So now let's look a little bit closer at transit funding in Chattanooga. The city of Chattanooga, which has made a flat $5.8 million contribution to CARTA's operating budget for years, did not meet CARTA's $8.3 million request in 2024, appropriating $6.3 million instead. Hamilton County, after making what had long been a flat annual contribution of roughly $100,000, zeroed out its CARTA funding altogether in 2024. As a result, Chattanooga spends less per capita on transit than most peer cities and receives far less from state and local funding. That directly generated revenue number is really impressive. I have a feeling it's because of is it the streetcars?
The incline.
The incline. I had a feeling that's what it was. And as we talked about at the beginning, funding drives service, service drives ridership. A few other transportation-related outcomes that I wanted to share. These are data points from Think Tennessee's State of Our Counties dashboard. Hamilton County does well on a few indicators, most notably commute time. Long commutes, particularly ones over 30 minutes, are particularly damaging to economic mobility. But most jobs are here in Hamilton County, as you can see by the percentage of workers that are commuting outside of the county. Being in the top 10 is always good. Being in the bottom 10, so 85 to 95, always bad. So people aren't traveling too far to get to work yet. But there are some challenges when it comes to road quality and road safety, which indicates inadequate funding for maintenance and safety projects. And finally, transportation in Chattanooga is unaffordable. The typical household in Hamilton County is spending 23% of their income on transportation, a whopping $14,414 per year. Remember that 15%, or about $9,800, is considered affordable. So as Chattanooga starts to look to the future, I wanted to share a few points about what makes transit successful. The principles above are pulled from a number of sources, but mostly from Trains, Buses, People by Christoph Spieler and Better Buses, Better Cities by Stephen Higginshide, two of my favorite transit books, if you don't know them and aren't familiar with them. And I'm going to touch on just a few of them: equity, travel time, and frequency. First, we're going to start with equity. High quality transit can play a huge role in economic mobility. Good transit lifts people up. Bad transit keeps people down. Transit has an opportunity to close the wealth and opportunity gap that exists in Hamilton County, where white households in Hamilton have 1.8 times the income of black households. 8.5% of white Hamilton County residents live below the federal poverty line, compared to almost 23% of black residents. Over twice as many white residents have earned a bachelor's degree or higher relative to black residents. And this isn't because black residents aren't working. They're almost equal in terms of their labor force participation, and in fact, black residents have slightly higher labor force participation than white residents. So as Chattanooga starts to think about how to improve transit, how to invest in transit, I suggest focusing on travel time, measuring access to destinations in 30 minutes. I shamelessly borrowed these slides from Jarrett Walker, because if somebody's already saying it right, just go ahead and copy them. He does such a good job of explaining the point of transit: access to destinations within 30 to 45 minutes. And what he's talking about here is that you want to think about where a person is, what that person can get to in 30 to 45 minutes, and how to focus on the destinations, jobs, schools, shopping, that are most important to her sort of success in life, and how to estimate that access on transit. A few other do's or don'ts that I've learned over the years is you do want to put transit investments where the people are. That sounds pretty intuitive, right? You'd be shocked how many cities get this wrong. Also, you do want to allow for density to increase where transit is. We're not talking about Manhattan density. We're talking 2 stories, 3 stories. We don't want to put transit on the path of least resistance or in places that can't densify. Lots and lots of cities have looked at a former commuter rail line that isn't used very much right now, and they've said, let's put a light rail line on that old former commuter rail line. Well, if that former commuter rail line isn't where the people are, isn't where the destinations are, it's not going to be a good use of resources. It's also really important to serve all trips. Do connect all major activity centers, not just downtown, employment hubs, medical centers, and universities. Don't plan for just commute trips. And finally, think about connectivity. Design transit networks to create good, easy connections. Do enable easy transfers. There are many transit agencies in the country that still charge people for transferring a bus, which seems crazy to me. And don't drop riders miles from their destination. Don't accept misconnections. Again, this sounds obvious, right? But I can name dozens of transit projects across the country that have ended their transit service, dropped them off a half mile from the destination that they're trying to get them to. Make transit the easy choice. So the final point I want to make is about frequency. It doesn't matter how big of a city you are or how dense you are, frequency drives ridership. It's as simple as that. If a bus comes every 10 to 15 minutes, riders don't have to even bother looking up the schedule. They know a bus is coming relatively soon. And once people know the bus will be there, then it becomes something that they can build their life around. That opens up a world of possibility and opportunity. Now that sounds really easy, but every transit agency in the country has to balance frequency with coverage. And if you don't have dedicated funding, those are really hard choices to make. And if you tend to lean a little bit more towards coverage, where you have bus service on as many streets and routes as you can, trying to cover a large area, your frequency goes drastically down. That's when you have buses that are coming every 30 minutes, every 60 minutes, every 90 minutes. That's not frequency that people can build their life around. So as we start to look for the future, I just have 3 quick suggestions that will definitely sound familiar after listening to the last 40 minutes or so. The first is a frequent bus network. A frequent bus network is the backbone of every successful transit city across the country and across the world, but we're a little bit behind the 8 ball on that one. A high-quality transit system is one that has a frequent bus network that provides 15-minute service on key corridors. It can be 4 corridors, it can be 20 corridors, and that they operate a minimum of 20 hours per day, 7 days a week. As I already talked about, focus on access-oriented improvements. Design new transit investments around key destinations that help people get to where they want to go. Make crosstown trips possible and as convenient as they can be. And finally, this is particularly important to you all that are here in the room, start building strategic and coordinated coalitions. All successful transit efforts build off of a broad coalition of support from stakeholders and reflect long-range mobility plans for the city and the region. Building the coalition of a transit advocacy ecosystem is critical, and it's something that can start today. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak to you this evening. Big thanks to Eric and Jack for having me. I'm super excited to see where Chattanooga goes from here, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much.